SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network Link 352. I'm your host, Spencer Presley, and joining me this week is the one and the only Bradley Ellis from LSM. How's it going?
Hey, hello. I'm doing good. Hope you're doing well.
I'm at my standing desk, so I at least will not be sitting down for however long this is. That's like the one thing that I'm like, it's nice to sit down, but also, as you remember, is like, hard not to be like, oh yeah, I should just like sit, and then like 12 to like 16 hours later go, and you're like, oh yeah, your body hates you now. You've sat down for too long. It's not gonna let this
I love
happen.
standing desks. I wish I had one, but they're awesome.
It was ironically like the most boring adult gift my dad ever gave me like 2 or 3 years ago. I was working from home and he was like, hey, I'm going to get you a gift that's going to look really lame, but I promise you'll like it. And he got me, I just started my first like remote job because like we were like a year or two into the pandemic at this point. And he got me a standing desk. I'm like, oh, I mean, I needed a new desk. My desk was like literally my childhood desk. It was like super ghetto, had been used and abused. Like you could literally see where my heavy ass George Foreman PS3 had been for like 20 years on it. It was just like a staple of that desk, but it like made a permanent weight dent in it. So it was like I needed like a real desk. And it was funny when I got it, I was like really excited because it was like building it was super easy, and it was just one of those things of like, outside of moving it is terrible. Building it's easy, moving it is a pain because you will never unbuild it. But it's like if you know where you're gonna be for a while and stuff for it, it is nice to have. The one thing I don't get, and like maybe I'll try it and I'll be like, oh, I totally get it. Have you seen those like treadmill desks?
Treadmill desk? No,
so
I don't think so.
It's like you have a miniature treadmill, or even like I've seen ones where like people will put like the gym bikes where like you can sit down and do like the pedaling or walking while you're at the desk.
Whoa, crazy.
And I'm like, that one, I'm like, that's too far. I'm like, if I'm gonna be at a treadmill, I'd rather just be on a treadmill. I'm not gonna be doing like a spreadsheet while like working a mile and a half on the pedal.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the one that I'm like, listen, I'll try it if the time ever comes. But, like, that's like, so, like, all right, how can I make a desk cost $3,000?
Yeah, jeez.
So, for everyone out there who may not know you, which, by the way, I was very happy when I shared yesterday that you were going to be on the show. Nobody was like, who the hell is Brad? So,
nice.
for the people out there who may not know you, who the heck are you, and where may they know you from?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career at Game Trailers back in the day. Then when Game Trailers went away, I was a co-founder of Easy Allies, and I was there for, I think, about 7 years, I want to say. And earlier this year, I made the jump to Last Stand Media, and I have 2 podcasts over there. Summon Sign, which is our weekly in-depth game discussion podcast where we just kind of talk about where we're playing, all that stuff. And our other one is a Nintendo podcast called Punching Up, which I just took over from my good friend Dustin Furman, because he's going to be doing some other stuff. So that's currently what I'm doing right now.
And I mean, it was kind of funny of like when you officially announced joining like Punching Up, it was just one of those things of being like, it seemed like kind of such a natural fit, like even more so coming from like being a GT fan of yours. With like going from Frame Trap to like Summon Sign, it's like, oh yeah, like you could just have them all on the same feed and it's not really going to feel that different,
right?
In a natural way, which is probably what you want.
Yeah, totally.
And it is just kind of funny of like one of those ones with it is like with you being the host, it was kind of one of those things of like what I forget whenever it was, but whenever Dagan because I'm not sure how long had you either been listening or like were you ever aware before working at Last Stand? Like were you ever listening to any of their shows or like how aware of like kind of the different shows were you?
I was pretty aware from some of them. I would say maybe like a year before I joined. I would say I've been friends with Dustin for a while, for a couple years already. So I was familiar through all that stuff, I would say.
Well, because it was like funny of like the most natural fit that was like you might as well like have gone back in time and it always feels like they were the host was like Dagon with Constellations. Like
Right. Yeah,
he
yeah.
is such a perfect fit on that show that it is kind of funny of like I love when anyone hosts that show, but I am so inclined to just be like, oh, if Dagon's not on, I'm like, oh wow, okay. It's like it'd be like doing a Sacred Symbols or whatever without Colin. It'd be like, oh
Right,
wow, this
yeah.
is weird.
Yeah, Dagon's the best, so I'm happy that he's back doing
Oh my
Constellation.
god,
That's great.
it felt. I mean, he was only gone for like 6 months, but it felt
Yeah,
like forever.
yeah, it did.
And I mean, that's got to be one of the crazy things as well of, especially with you having come from GT, Easy Allies, and now with Last Stand. It's one of those weird ones of like you are just kind of always doing stuff, and it's not like there's ever like, oh well, like year one of Easy Allies versus like year 6 or 7 versus like now with Last Stand. Like you guys were the schedule was always just kind of like bam, 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 bam. Of like there
Mhm.
was never really quiet weeks outside of like December or like
Right.
something really really slow, just because with like the podcast and other stuff like that. Is it ever just sort of weird of like obviously these have been your full time job for the most part, but are there ever those like times where it's like does it feel like you've just kind of been in marathon mode of like doing one thing after another without really ever having a break, or like because
Mm,
it's games has it just sort of been like, well, I would be doing this with or without the podcast?
It depends on like when I was reviewing stuff like a lot more when I was at Easy Allies during, review season, what the people like to call it or whatever, the fall and all that kind of stuff. I was very busy with work. I was like constantly reviewing stuff, so I was tired then, but I'd still be playing games anyways. I guess the only thing that gets a little annoying, it's not a big deal at all when you really think about it. It's just when I'm playing games sometimes it always feels like I'm doing it for work and not too often for myself, I'd say. But at the same time, it's just like, well, I'm just playing a game. It's not a big deal. I've
Mm-hmm.
because like I've had bad jobs in my life, so I'm very lucky and I totally acknowledge all that.
See, all my job history I know of you is literally games coverage and hairdresser. That's
Mm-hmm.
the only ones. Like
Mm-hmm.
what's like a bad or like kind of like
Bad
middly
job.
job you've had where you're like, oh, I'm
So
so glad I'm not going
let's
back to
see.
this.
I worked at a pizza place for a while when I was like 18, probably like 18 to 20, I'd say. And when I was like 16, I think I worked at PetSmart. I remember. I think that was my first job, and that job sucked. I hated that job like the most. So yeah, and but hair wasn't that bad, but just standing all day can get kind of brutal for like 12 hours a day.
No, yeah, nothing like I'm gonna stand and do this person's hair for like 30 minutes to an hour, and then
Mm-hmm.
hopefully get like a $2 tip.
Yeah, yeah.
So kind of recently, I mean, God, is it really? So you really did just start in what January this year was when you were
Mm-hmm.
officially on Last Stand. I want you to be on. I'm being honest with you. It feels like it's been like over 2 years. It's like I don't know why this year feels like it's been like 3 in 1.
Really? Wow. Yeah, this year's gone really fast for me. So I don't know, but yeah, I started technically at the end of December to get stuff ready before their holiday break. That's when we kind of take our LSM takes time off, like usually like the last 2 weeks. So I started technically like mid-December, I would say. But yeah, the first episode didn't come out till New Year's Day, I think, is when the first episode came out. So yeah, less than a year.
Yeah, and I think it's also one of those things of doing a podcast weekly. You just get into such that rotation of like, all right, well, it's just that thing that's kind of always been there. It doesn't really
Yeah.
feel like even with like comparing like bi-weekly shows or monthly. My thing that I always find funny is I notice, especially since we've been doing this show for so long over the last like 10 plus years, people always like ask me like, well, why do you do this weekly? It's like such a niche thing to be doing weekly, and it's like I enjoy doing it as often as I can, but the other thing is I notice a lot of shows that spread themselves out of being like, oh well, we'll do it every 2 or 3 weeks. are usually like the first shows to like stop after a year, because
Yeah.
it's that thing of like you're so used to not doing it that it's like, oh well, you know, there's not really been anything in the news, or there hasn't been a game in a couple of months, I guess we won't talk about it. Has been like, it's really easy to sort of let that slip through the cracks. Especially it's kind of like going to the gym, in that sense of like, you want to go, you want to make that a part of your schedule, because it's so easy just to drop it.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. It needs to be, if you're consistent with kind of things, you'll just kind of get into a routine with it, and it'll almost feel weird if you don't do it after a little bit. Because, I mean, like you said, it is easy to kind of slip out and get not lazy, but just be like, well, I can do it this time. There's nothing really to talk about, stuff like that. So yes, doing stuff weekly absolutely helps. Since punching up right now is bi-weekly. It might be weekly when Switch 2 comes out, but right now it's bi-weekly.
Listen, that seems like the most unspoken "it's happening, but we can't say it's happening" thing ever. It's like, listen, what are we gonna talk? Are we gonna talk about? Donkey Kong Country Returns every week for the next month? It'll be like for the Nintendo one, it definitely makes sense, especially being slower. But what's funny is, like, at any moment, I feel like if you guys were just like, hey, we want to do a weekly episode of Punching Up, it's like, it's not like there's nothing Nintendo wise to talk about.
Right. Yeah. Stuff is starting to ramp up, so it'll make sense around that time. And especially with Punching Up, because, well, I'm sure you know Sacred Symbols can be very long, and that's totally fine. That's just the way it is. So Punching Up doesn't have to be as long. But I will say, since I've joined LSM, everything has just gotten longer that I've done. And I think I've just kind of adapted to how
I was listening to Constellation, the one that was last week for I guess this week's for everyone was like last week. So like whatever one that Chris was on, not the politics one, I saw the YouTube comments, because there was something. Oh, I was looking for comments about Ben's topic. And when I looked through the comments, 80% of the comments were all like, God, I hate how short these 3-person shows are. They're only 2 hours. And it's like, it's so funny, because like, I get where they're coming from. But It's like, you have to realize, most people, no matter how much you love any show or every show at Last Stand Media, like, the metrics cannot be that everyone's listening to everything.
Right.
It's just, there's no way. Like, I need proof. Like, the only reason I'm making through as much shows as I am now is, like, I'm now at a job where I'm not talking to anyone, and I'm just pretty much glued to my AirPods and my computer all day. That's the only reason. Like, most people don't have a 3-hour commute every day that they can burn through an episode, like, let alone a 2-hour long episode.
Right. Yeah.
But I think at the same time, though, what's nice is no one's ever like, oh, well, I don't want to do a show that's longer, because there are some shows, like, I've been a fan of some podcasts that were always like, oh, we have to do it like a tight 60 or a tight 90, and you get to those ones where it's like, I kind of wish you guys would have talked about this more, because it just sort of feels like you were stuck to that timeline. It's like, unless you like literally have to go, it sort of makes it feel unfulfilled, versus like, I can't think of the last time I've seen you guys do a show where I'm like, oh dang, I wish I could have heard more about this topic.
Right. Yeah. My philosophy is, I think the shows should just be as long as they need to be. I don't like rushing it if it's possible, but I also don't like dragging it out just for the sake of having a longer runtime. So whatever just feels right is where I like to fall. Like, let's see. The last Constellation I was on, I think, was 4.5 hours, or recording was 4.5 hours, and it's like, that was awesome, but I'm hungry, man. I need to take a break or something.
The comment that I forget what show it was, but the fact that Colin made a comment mid-show to be like, hey guys, if you want to eat off mic, you could eat during the show. Like, it was like, it's just turned into like a hostage situation now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, since like you're almost like pretty much at that 12-month mark with like working at Last Stand. Like, what's kind of been your takeaway of anything that's sort of surprised you? Anything like that's been sort of weird to not do, like whether it be something like weekly group streams? Like, what's sort of it been like looking at your life 12 months ago versus now?
Well, I used to have to commute to go to our Easy Allies thing like 40 minutes, and I don't miss that, so that's great. I don't miss that at all. I kind of miss reviewing stuff sometimes. I think reviewing stuff could be fun, if it was something I was really into, especially. but I like not having deadlines for that kind of stuff and taking my time with a lot of things. I mean, I did, even when I reviewed stuff, I would make sure I wouldn't put out a review till I was happy with it or feel like I had enough time with it. But just being able to be like, well, I can take 3 weeks with this game if I want to, or something like that. That is really nice, and I do really like that.
Has there been? I'm sure you guys must get asked this like a million and one times, but it's like, how many requests have you had at this point to try and hijack and get Huber on Sacred Symbol, the Sacred Symbol summon sign?
A million times, and Huber knows it. He's welcome on anytime. So just whenever he wants to be on, or any of them, it's just up to them whenever they want to go on it.
It is just one of those. It is one of those funny ones of like, there were so many kind of like, I don't even know, because like it was like everybody who was like, whether it be at GT or at Easy Allies, like had that thing of like, all right, well, when it comes to talking about this or this, you're gonna kind of expect X, Y, or like Z and stuff with it. But it was that like funny thing of like, especially with like how much you and Huber talk, or like how much like because you guys have known each other forever, of like, it's actually been kind of interesting of like seeing you guys not really do very much on microphone or on camera separate, just because it's that thing of like, we had seen it for so long. Like, has it sort of been weird, or like, do you guys like still like obviously like talk like online and stuff with it, but like, has it sort of been interesting to be like, oh wow, yeah, I haven't really done like a podcast with this dude in like 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do something with Hubert. Just it's not weird, I guess. Us just doing stuff. I mean, I guess it's weird in the sense that we did stuff for so many years together and we're not anymore. And I do miss it sometimes, but yeah, I mean, I talk to Huber all the time. Like, me and him just hung out like 2 days ago. So yeah, we're still fine. We're doing great. But yeah, sometimes I do, and like me and Hubert talk about games with each other all the time and stuff like that. So we still get that communication with each other. But yeah, we're just not on podcasts, I would say, together, which is fine.
Yeah. I also thank you for not hating the GIF that I used on the tweet with you yesterday. I want you to know that's like the third image of you that comes up on Twitter when you search your name. I just typed in Brad Ellis and I was like, wow, this is a very hyper specific GIF of you and Ben.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what video that was, but yeah, I do remember filming that.
I think that was a Game Trailers video, but like, man, especially like that and like the Easy A ones, like they really bleed together. Of like, oh, it was like what was what and what was the other.
Yeah. I think that one was Easy Allies, but I can't remember what video it was for. It might have been something for Ilos. Maybe it was Opinion Yell or something like that. I can't recall.
So the funny thing though about like using that GIF, I didn't even really think about with it was, we had a couple people like on our Facebook group and I even saw a couple people on Twitter who were, just because he was also in there with Ben, it was like, Ben's another one of like, that's a funny one of, he left Easy A at like the perfect time for him to completely fall off the earth. Like, have you kept in touch with Ben like at all?
Occasionally, yeah. Occasionally we talk.
So like, the funny thing with Ben was, I'd had him on, I think 2 or 3 times over the years since like 2015. And what was funny was like, the week his Twitter got hacked, like what was that, like 2020 or something?
Right. Something like that.
Like the week that was supposed to happen, we were going to have him on for like a P5R like spoiler cast. And it was the funniest thing ever of like, oh, I just realized like this was the only way I'd had to like contact him or something. Because it was like the exact same time like his Twitter pretty much got hacked. He was just like, all right, well, whatever, I'm going to go move. And then he like nuked his Facebook. And I was like, oh, wow, I have like, no, it was like every way to contact him had completely fallen off. And it was funny because like I'll always see like every now and then people being like, because even with like you and like Kyle and everyone else, like who's ever like kind of gone off from Easy A to do their own thing, you guys are all still very easy to find online. Like that's been like the weird one with Ben is like, oh yeah, like unless like you've moved to Iowa or wherever the hell he is, like you're not really gonna like find Ben right now.
Right. Yeah. He decided just to go off and do his own thing, which I totally respect, and I'm happy he's doing good. Last time I talked to him, he was happy, so that's great.
Yeah. And I mean, for the longest time, especially just sort of like from like a fan's perspective, you guys always had such a night, and I mean, you guys is just kind of like you and everyone you'd worked with, whether it be Last Stand or even like EZA and GT. You guys had such a great coverage method of like, I always loved your reviews and everything like that with it, but I'm sure you guys would hear this all the time with it of just like, you guys could pretty much just throw the camera on with no outline or anything really, and people would still want to watch and just have that kind of like hangout vibe, which was always so nice.
Yeah. I guess that's what people tell us all the time. So I'm happy that's where we found an audience, just kind of like that. Because I don't know, we always just wanted the vibe of us just hanging out and talking about games like how we would do off camera. So that's kind of what we would do on camera, and I'm glad people enjoyed it. Because yeah, it's insane. We're just rambling about games and people are enjoying it.
Now, besides the obvious stuff people always like ask you guys about, I'm always curious, like, is there ever anything that you're just like in the back of your head, like, man, if there was like an extra like eighth day in the week, what's like something you wish you could do more online, whether it be like another show or something to do that's like outside of what you already do in your normal kind of like schedule?
Right. Let's see. Probably YouTube channel. Just my own YouTube channel. Just kind of talking about games and all that stuff. I had like I guess you could say like a pilot of that. That was at Easy Allies. I did a video on Breath of the Wild, and that's kind of what I was gonna plan on to do more of. Maybe I'll do that in the future. I have some ideas, but I just got to find the right time to do it.
Yeah, one of my like favorite videos that I think about mostly in the sense of like, oh, like I'd been listening to you forever but would have never known this, was I forget whatever stream it was or even what the reason was, but whatever like 3 hour stream you were on for Kyle where you guys just talked about One Piece spoilers.
Oh yeah. I
Like
think that was his. Yeah.
that one was so funny of like, I had just like, and I'm sure like you'd mentioned it before, but you were never really like as outspoken about it, of like, I was like, oh, I had no idea how much you fucked with One Piece, and like I'd been listening to you for years.
Well, it's because I took like 10 plus years off of One Piece, I would say. So it wasn't
Fishman
until I got
Island
back.
just noped you out. You were like, oh
Yeah,
man,
I did.
I don't want
Yeah.
to I don't want to look at these mermaids.
I was caught up, yeah, for a while. Then I just kind of, I don't know, I got bored or something like that, or something else came into my life, and I just kind of fell off it. But then, yeah, when I started talking about it again, when I was getting back into it, and I'm all caught up now, so I'm very happy about all that because it's awesome.
Yeah, like I've always had this thing of I enjoy so many kind of different hobbies that I always wish and feel kind of guilty I can't really give more attention to. Like video games is always like a big one that I do online, very forward facing a lot, but like a big one for mine that I'm always like, man, I could literally probably stop buying any other new video games, play my backlog, and just like talk about like anime and manga or like trading card games and like even just like other books in general and like movies and stuff with it. But it's just that thing of like, it's hard, let alone to keep up with it, but then it's also hard because it's like I have all these kind of ideas I ever want to do on my own side, let alone be like, all right, well, I don't ever want to half-ass it, but also you don't want to be in that weird limbo state where you're just juggling 15 unfinished like projects all at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. Absolutely.
Well, possibly this might be the most delayed intro to our actual intro possible, but that is not anything new to this show. Brad, for this very great long introduction to who you are, we are actually the internet's most number one somehow, I think, just by lasting the longest from not wanting to die. But we do talk about Atlus and SMT occasionally on this show, you would hope. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is you've been a fan of Atlus, Persona, and a bunch of their other games for a long time. They've had so many crazy releases, not even counting Metaphor, that I kind of wanted to bring you on. And for anyone out there who may not know your history, what was either like your first Atlus or Persona game, and what kind of got you into the series?
Let me see. First Atlus game, I'm trying to think back. It might have been, I don't know if it was, but the one I can only recall right now off the top of my head is probably Nocturne. I
Okay.
think when I like actually played SMT games.
I assume the PS2 version?
Yeah. I knew about some of their other games. I just never really played them because back then I didn't have a lot of money to play games. You just
I
kind
mean,
of
Atlus
played.
games were hard to find back then. Like back in, it was
Yeah,
like they weren't working designs hard to find, but like an Atlus, like they were definitely no Square Enix, especially back then.
yeah, totally. And like around that time, there were so many awesome Japanese role playing games already that I was so busy. But I can't remember if I borrowed Nocturne from a friend or I rented it one of those. But I remember playing it and being like, "Whoa, this is really tough. What's going on here?" I wasn't used to that.
See, that's funny. We don't normally get Nocturne very much. Like, and it's not even like, oh well, everyone says P5 or everyone says one or the other. Nocturne is just a funny one of like that was like such a huge start for SMT proper in
Mm-hmm.
the West, especially because that was like literally the first time they had brought it over with that name. But it is just funny of like, yeah, it was a really big release, and a lot of people obviously are really nostalgic for it. But I think, especially sort of like how wide it, like even in more recent memory, it's like hell, we have people who like it used to be weird if it was like, oh, how did you get into Atlus? And it was like, oh, I played Ultimax. And like
Right.
now it's like, oh, I mean, if you tell me Smash Brothers, I'm not even gonna like bat an eye. But like, yeah, sure. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, that makes sense.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's great. SMT is bigger than ever, and it's awesome to see Alice do so well now.
So besides obviously getting clapped around by Matador, do you remember how
Mm-hmm.
far you might have gotten by in Nocturne when you played it?
No, I can't really remember. It's been so long. Like, yeah, I can't remember. Like, what year did that even come out? I don't even remember. It's been
Oh, oh
it's like
three
20
or oh
plus
four.
years.
Yeah, it was. It
Yeah.
wasn't an early release, but it definitely wasn't like long. And
I
it's
don't
one of
think I
those
got
ones where like
super
there were
far.
four versions of it, so that makes it also weirder to
Oh, okay,
remember.
yeah. Yeah. I don't think I got super far in it cuz I think I only had it for like a couple days or something like that at the time. But yeah, I just remember getting destroyed and being like, "Whoa, what is going on in this role-playing game?" I'm not it just it was like one of the hardest role-playing games I ever played at that time.
Yeah, and it's really funny like going back to some of those hard ones of like Nocturne is definitely still hard, but like I remember when I went back to the HD version. I probably hadn't played it in 15 or so years at that point, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh yeah, like I would still die at bosses every now and then," but it was one of those things of like something about RPGs, I think even if you've just played it before, you have that thing in the back of your head that it's like, okay, well, I'm kind of expecting this now, or I'm more like ready for something
Yeah.
that's going to happen. Like you not knowing about Matador your first time is like, yeah, you're not going to know what his weakness is. Like you're, whereas like even going back to that, if you're not subconsciously aware of it, like you're still going to be at least a little bit more prepared for it. Whereas like you very rarely will hear someone go back and be like, oh man, yeah, like I went back and played Chrono Trigger 20 years later, and I can't even play it. It's impossible now.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's like you said, like expectations and stuff like that. Because I had no expectations about Nocturne when I played. I didn't know anything about it, so I didn't. Yeah, I had no idea what I was getting in myself into.
Yeah, and I mean it's one of those funny ones of like it's very unique even to this day in terms of like the look and the setting and other things with it, but it's like yeah, there was no voice acting back then. You're just playing as this dude without a shirt on running around like blown up Tokyo, and it's just desert for like 40 hours.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, what part of the desert did you find so memorable? That's why it's like funny when people are like, man, SMT5 is so boring. You're just in the desert the whole time. It's like, yes, but at least I knew the name of this desert. I could at least tell you what area
Yeah.
this desert is in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
This desert has the skyscrapers. This one has the mushrooms. This is a very
Mhm.
different desert.
Yeah.
What about kind of from there? Like, did you
um
get into any of the PS2 personas
yeah,
or?
I played the first Persona I played was 3 FES. Was it Fez or FEZ?
Mhm.
That's the one I own. I played that one. And I really liked it a lot. I To this day though I still don't like Tartarus. I'm not a fan of it. And I remember being frustrated at the game because I couldn't control my party members and they would just get me killed sometimes. I'm just like, oh, it
It
was brutal.
was so funny watching when the demo for Metaphor came out, some people have like Persona 3 flashbacks of like, oh my god, can you not control your party members until you get your
Right.
archetype? And it was like, man, there's a part of me that like kind of wonders of like, they probably did that of like, yeah, you probably could have controlled those party members from the start, but it'd be funny just to make people sweat and think, because like there's like always two sides of like, I feel like Atlus fans are either like, I never want to play a game where I don't have direct control of my party members. And then there are some people who are like they swear. They're like, "Oh no. The best way to play Persona is by letting the terrible AI do their job."
I can see people liking that and the appeal of it, I guess, but I feel like it's such like a limiting factor for most players probably.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's like the most definition of, I feel like, of the minority there with it, and it's like
Yeah.
that's probably for like those people out there. And I always find this funny because like I have been a fan of the series for like pretty much the better part of my entire life. And what's funny is like there is not a single one of these games that I've beaten and went, "Oh damn, bro, I got to do this again." But
Yeah.
like there are those people out there who are like, "Oh yeah, I've beaten Persona 4 like 20 times." And I'm like,
Damn.
"No, I will not
Yeah.
do that."
Yeah, no. I'm good. There's too many other games I'd rather play
Yeah,
as well.
like I would feel so bad. Like there are games like I've replayed for platinums or whatever, but like the way that these people do it, of like, oh yeah, dude, like I gotta commit myself to, I need to play. I mean, yeah, I have a bunch of normal examples. Like I could justify replaying Catherine. Like I
Hmm.
could do that and not really feel bad. Where like something like a Persona 5 Royal, I'm like, I'm gonna need like multiple console generations to pass before I go back to that game again. Especially now that it's been released so many times.
Yeah, definitely.
So another one that we like to ask people for it is, what is something, doesn't have to be Megaton related, could just be Persona, Atlus, whatever. What is
Hmm.
something that's kind of on your pile of shame that you're like, man, I really got to get to this?
Let's see. Well, if you just want to, I would like to try Persona 1 and 2 someday. I don't know if it might be too archaic for me. I'm not exactly sure because they are PS1 games, I
Brad,
believe,
are
right?
you not playing Pokemon Gold in the year 2024 right
I
now?
just finished it. Yeah. Well, Pokemon is
You're
much more
playing literally
simple.
like a 20-year-old baby's RPG, and you're like, I don't
Exactly.
know if I
It's
can handle
very
these
simple.
mechanics
It's
anymore.
very simple. SMT games are usually are not in there much longer. Like it's like I'm like, well, will there be enough narrative to keep me interested in the whole way through, or is it mostly a battle focused kind of game? I don't really know because I haven't played them, but I am curious about those.
Yeah, one is a lot shorter, but is definitely like, if you've ever played the first or second SMT game, they're very much kind of that ilk of like thematically deep, story not as much, but it has a lot of kind of interesting things
Hmm.
pulling at you. The PSP versions help with that a lot, especially like it's always so funny going back to the original Persona that we got. Like that game has so little content when you really think about like how they split it up, and the fact that like the largest subquest in the whole game got cut out because they just didn't have time is so funny. It's like, oh yeah, like it would be like, imagine if when Final Fantasy VII came out, they were like, yeah, we just kind of had to get rid of the gold saucer. Like you didn't need it, so I mean, you guys will be fine.
Yeah.
Just don't ever think about it.
Yeah, that sucks, man.
So Persona 2 though, definitely, I mean, it was like a sequel 4 years later and like a duology. Like they had way grander scale with like the story and everything for that one. Like that one holds up immaculately well. The shitty part with that one though is the only official way to play it is the first game remade on the PSP, which is great, and then you have to play the original PS1 version because they couldn't be bothered to make the PSP remake in English.
Oh man.
So I feel like in my heart of hearts, especially like, listen, we're kind of running out of games to like have them re-release at this point. So like unless we get Dancing All Night again, like we're gonna get these games eventually. The kind of question is like, do we imagine that they're gonna have the cojones to sort of do like a pixel remaster version of these first three games? Or are they
Hmm.
just gonna like kind of like fart out a PSP remaster? Because honestly, I think either option would work, and a lot of
Yeah.
people would be happy. it's just going to be one of those ones of, that no matter which one they pick, there will still be people who are like, oh, well, you should have done the other one instead.
Yeah, I can honestly see them doing both. Like with Persona 3 and 4, they re-released them on like modern platforms, but
Mm-hmm.
they remade 3. I bet they'll remake 4, so I wouldn't be surprised if they give that treatment to 1 and 2 in the future as well.
A remake, I would be genuinely shocked. I think like it would be cool and a lot cheaper, but I feel like we're probably more closer to like what they, at least for starters, I feel like they're more likely going to do like with the P3P and P4G ports of like, okay, what can we throw into Unity as cheaply as possible and just get this out there. The tricky part is there is at least an entire third of those games missing an English patch. Because they can't just use that original PS1 version. That PS1 version is like really good for the time, but that doesn't correlate to the remake. The remake actually added a ton of content.
Yeah, well, never count Atlus out on that kind of stuff. They just might leave it out for just because.
They've gotten better like recently for sure. Like I mean we've done this show long enough of like they've had like especially back in the day there were just so many bone scratchingly confusing moves that they would make even in like the 3DS era, like ones that will like still never make sense to us is like they just straight up gave up dubbing their games at the end of the 3DS. They were like, oh well, we'll put them out, but like yeah, we won't give them any like voice acting.
And
like that's such a deterrence for so many people. They're like, oh, reading, no thank you, I will not be playing this game.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've become it's not specifically a JRPG issue, but I feel like certain JRPG games have sort of given me a snobbery that even if I don't hold it against a game, I'm always thinking about it for really narrative heavy games. Like a big one for me back in like 2020 was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake and then replaying I first played Persona 5 Royal and then I played Remake. And I remember playing Remake, I was like, oh my god, everything is voice acted.
Yeah.
And like obviously one is like a 30-hour game versus like an 80-hour game, but like then you go to Rebirth and they still kept up that bar of quality. And they've gotten a lot better. Like if you play Persona 3 Reload does a lot more voice acting, but then even then it's like different teams, different qualities, different kind of budgets. Like you play Metaphor, almost no one's social rank talks are ever voiced. And it's like, why are these not voice acted?
Yeah, it is a little strange.
So it's like stuff like that of like, it's never enough that it like holds it off, but it's those things of like you kind of get so used to it and it's such a nice quality of life feature that it's like, oh man, this was great. Why don't the rest of you do this?
Yeah, I feel like Atlus games like Metaphor and like SMT or like Persona games, they kind of have this old school quality in the sense of like for example in Metaphor, the towns or whatever, they're all like divided up into small sections and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, this feels very much like a PS2, PS1 era kind of thing still. It's like it's not like a big seamless thing like I was kind of expecting. Or some of the dungeons are they remind me of I don't know if you ever played Dark Cloud. Cloud 1 particularly. I was like, these feel like Dark Cloud dungeons or something like that, or just kind of narrow hallways or stuff like that. It still feels kind of old to me. It's not a big deal, but I just kind of wish they would elevate it, I suppose.
And it's interesting because yeah, they do a lot of like baby steps of like, I always feel like it's 2 step forward, 1 step back with them of like they're always making progress, but it kind of just it's always like all right, well what's like a focus for them versus like, oh, they have to do this or they have to do that. Cuz like I think what's funny is like the world of Metaphor feels so much better than the world of like Persona 5, even though if you look at some of those areas, Persona 5 probably has bigger zones, but there's not as many of them.
Right. Yeah.
And it's one of those interesting things of, all right, where do they want to focus their time? Where do they want to focus their attention? And that's like one of my favorite things is like always listening or reading any of the interviews that either the team at Atlus or like Studio Zero does, because they get such a long leash. Like their runway for development is crazy. Of like, if you ever look up some of the development stuff, especially behind like Persona 5, they probably scraped at least 2 or 3 times as much content as what they actually released.
Damn.
Yeah, like there are funny things with it of like, even things like that are included in the game that like it would cost more money to fix, and they're just like they have to find ways to retcon them out. Like one of my favorite ones where they paid for all of the animation for all the animated cutscenes so early in development of Persona 5 that the reason they stopped doing them as much as you get later on out of the first quarter of the game is because they changed those later characters so much, and they changed the reasons and the rules. Like a funny one that I always go to is the second or third palace. I think it might even be Futaba's or whatever, but there's a scene where it shows Morgana in a cat form in the metaverse in the animated cutscene, and then as soon as they're out of the animated cutscene, there's like a little throwaway line that's like, "Oh, weird. That's weird. Why, Morgana? Why did you look like that?" And they're like, "I don't know, man." And it was because, like, yeah, they were animating these cutscenes so many years in advance that things had changed, and even other ones of like character designs and character, like the way they acted. Like Haru was a completely different character when they animated all of these cutscenes. That they were like, "Oh, we can't keep like any of these." And it's like that's got to be so frustrating because like it's this thing that like which is extra funny of like you think of like how much people associate anime with Persona 5, but like playing Metaphor has been so funny of like, oh wow, like they really flex those animated cutscenes. Like they have so many more of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do, which is great.
But again, like I forget the name of the company. I'll try and look it up for you. Did you watch? There was a Japanese documentary that came out this week. It was a like basically behind the scenes of what the development of Metaphor was like.
I saw that and I saved it for like my watch later tab because I do want to watch it. I just haven't had a moment to yet.
Yeah, so it's by and I will definitely butcher this. Archipel. They've done a bunch of like other documentaries and stuff. They actually had a really good one. If you want to add it to, it would be a good one to watch before the Metaphor. They did one pre-development for Metaphor, but after Studio Zero had been formed. So I think this would have been around the time Catherine Full Body was getting made, and when they were really staffing up and sort of getting everything together, because it was a really good documentary of like, hey, we're not obviously about to talk about the game, but because they announced Metaphor so early, and their big thing with it was always like, hey, we're like, they just wanted everyone and their mom to know Persona 6 is not our next game. We've made more money than God knows at this company, so we're going to just do the most un-Persona thing possible, and we just want to do our own thing. And it's funny of like how much even that changed, and like those two documentaries are just really interesting of like those guys go through so much pre-planning and development, but like because of like either scope, scale, money, or like just what makes more sense in terms of development for it, like they have to remove so much that it's like, man, I know people don't love that they do enhanced re-releases, but like it's funny that like there is stuff that was cut out of even like Persona 5 Royal, which is wild. It's like, bro, you made the director's cut. Why did you leave anything out of the director's cut?
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, for you, like, where do you kind of stand as, like, an Atlus fan of, like, when these re-releases come up? Like, I know a big one this year was, I think in the announcement, a lot more people were upset versus when it came out. But, like, when you saw something like a Persona 5 Royal or SMT 5 Vengeance, of like, oh, hey, dude, it's been 2.5 years. Thanks for playing the beta version. Here's the full game.
Yeah, I mean, I think what really just annoys me is you can't just like add on to your base game. You have to buy the game over again, as far as I'm aware.
Yes,
like,
that's the
$20.
Sega money hats in the room.
Yeah.
I feel like because it's like we all know technically there's nothing stopping them. They could do it if they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wish you could pay 20 or whatever, $30 to just add on to it, because like, I did buy your game at release and everything like that. But the thing is, it's not like I never feel like I didn't get my value from their games or anything like that as well. So it doesn't bother me too much, but well, let's see. Persona How many years was Royal between 5? Was it like 3 or 4 years?
It was 4. So yeah,
Okay.
2016 to 2020.
Yeah, I think that's a long time, so that doesn't really bother me, I guess, because by the time that comes out, I'd be like, okay, I could replay this game or something like that. It's been enough time. But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, well, I don't want this to hold up like a new game or something like that, new production.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially because I think there is always a lot of confusion of there are people out there who, and I mean, I think it makes sense, like, unless you're an uber nerd or whatever who follows like Japanese game development, like you are more than welcome to look at something like an SMT5 or a Persona 3 or especially Metaphor and be like, oh, it's from the makers of Persona 5, so I'm not going to get Persona 6 anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, no, like they've at least planned that out. Like they've actually done way better than I would have ever imagined in terms of stretching out their internal teams. Because like what's so crazy is like not even counting like Unicorn Overlord. Last year, like November last year, we had Persona 5 Tactica. 3 months
Mm-hmm.
later, we had Reload. Then we had Vengeance in June, and then Metaphor in October. It's like 12 months for 4 games, and all of those were internally developed by 4 different teams. Is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Their output's been really impressive recently. Really impressive, especially because we're not getting games super late anymore. We're getting them like day and date everywhere, so it's great.
Oh man, yeah, I do not miss the. I do not miss, like, everyone always is like, oh, the wait for Persona 5 was rough. Persona 4 was a lot rougher for me, but I think like that was such a different time back in 2008, even though
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't as long. The one that I think people forget way too often is, do you remember how long it took for them to even announce Persona 5 Strikers?
I remember knowing about Scramble or whatever for a
Yeah.
while, but I
Scramble was announced and released over a year and a half before they even announced it in English.
oh boy, yeah, that's a long time.
Like the fact that I had played, like, because this was always the crazy part. I had played Scramble and imported it before Royal even came out for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we didn't get any announcement until, oh man, I think it was like, I know it was something Jeff related because it was going to be in one of Jeff's shows, and then in classic Atlus tradition, they leaked it. Like Atlus themselves
Yeah,
leaked it early. So
yeah.
Jeff was like, "Oh well, no thanks. You guys already posted it. We're so like that got like completely the wind taken out of it with it. So that was one of those funny ones of like, it's not like, oh, a game had leaked and it's not out anywhere, so they're not going to talk about it. It was like literally, imagine if like Final Fantasy 17 was out and you didn't, and Square West couldn't talk about it for 12 months.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I
like,
get it,
dude,
man.
it's like, yeah, you can't do that anymore. Like, we all know what this game is.
Yeah, yeah. Times have changed, certainly.
Yeah, that was a really wild one, especially because they've still never like on the record said why they did it. Like the release timing was very weird. Like in Japan, it was October 2019 to February 2020. So like what, 5 months between basically a sequel and a remaster,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy. Like no company would really do that unless like you were Sega and you're like, holy crap, we got to make up something before the end of the fiscal quarter. But it's just really funny of like, yeah, you probably didn't need to release them that close to one another, but it's more wild that it kind of took them so long. And I think because COVID had just happened, a large part of it was like, not that like there were game studios using COVID as a fake excuse, but COVID was kind of like, you couldn't say that it was because of COVID, but everyone would just imply it was because of COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Even though dubs were still happening, games were still happening, people were doing stuff at home. It was kind of funny. It's like, well, I mean, we can make 13 Sentinels happen. We just can't do Persona 5 Strikers. That we can't do. No, that's impossible. So those are days I do not miss. I feel like, yeah, once we got to the point where I'm trying to think. I think SMT5 was the first worldwide release where like it was
Yeah.
day and date everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds right.
Like you can't really undo those anymore. And it's extra funny too because the way Atlus always develops their games, it's kind of led to them just getting more time to develop them because they're so used to in Japan. What they would always do is, a good example was when a game is about to come out and you finally get that announcement release date trailer for them. When Atlus Japan would put a release date on it, that game was content complete, like fully done, all ready to go. And that time from then to release was sort of like, all right, well, here's the time for Atlus West to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they started doing worldwide releases, what was funny was then it was just like, oh, well, we just have even more time. So like now, like they don't even have to worry about releasing in Asia first. They can just cook even longer. And it kind of led to those games feeling even better. Because like I can't even think of the last time an Atlus game has come out outside of like very tiny issues where it's like, oh yeah, this game was broken at launch.
Right. Yeah. They're usually pretty solid right away.
Yeah, no one's computer blew up because Soul Hackers 2 came out too quickly. So with the last couple of years, especially with kind of like how busy we've been, I know you've played Persona and I know you've played Metaphor. Did you get any time to mess around with Tactica or Vengeance?
Yeah, I beat Tactica. I really liked it a lot. It was great. I had a good time with it. I love tactic RPGs a lot, so that
Can
was right
we
up my
can we
alley.
get some love for the most underrated adult Persona user of all time, Toshiro?
Sure. Yeah. Toshiro was cool. Yeah.
Like
He's-
people, I think like that game. I hope eventually, like I think the art style didn't do it any favors, and it came out literally the same day as like a bunch of other games. Like, I think it literally came out like the same day as Mario RPG Remake, which did not help.
Oh yeah. Nah.
That game I feel like is so good, and Strikers kind of similarly, but I mean a lot of people played that as well. But especially Tactica kind of
Mm-hmm.
turned people off, where it's like that's a really good game that I feel like a fourth of the fan base maybe even played or is aware
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Like I don't know if it's the art style could be a thing with it. Yeah, it's much more like chibi or cartoony, I guess, even though their games are cartoony, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
And
Some weird long legs. They got like
yeah, and
some like Gumby proportions going on.
maybe the tactic RPG aspect didn't appeal to many people. But I also think it just came out at a bad time, like you said.
As a tactics fan, how'd you feel about it? My biggest surprise was I couldn't believe it was that team's first time making a tactical RPG. I was like, wow, it wasn't like amazing. It was no FF Tactics, but
Right.
like for a team who's never made one of these before, I was surprised how good it was.
Yeah. I was impressed with some like the battlefield designs. I really liked a lot and how well they incorporated the Persona elements into it. I thought were really good. Obviously, they could have gone deeper in many ways, but for a first time, especially like you said, their studio's first time with a tactic RPG, they did a really great job. Really good job.
I gotta ask though, because this is another one that like again bad business move, but if you did pony up, did you play the DLC for that game?
Yeah, because they added
There was like
um,
it was like a prequel side story to P5R where
yeah,
you
with
could
like the
play,
Kuti, right? Is that
yeah,
it?
Kasumi and Akechi. But the
Yeah.
craziest part about that whole one was like, yeah, it was cool they added two party members. Was like the whole paint mechanic that's like a completely new gameplay
Mm-hmm.
mechanic they never use in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did play that. Yeah, I think that's some cool stuff they could do in the future. Because I'm sure there'll be a spin-off for whenever
Oh
P6
God,
comes
no.
out or whatever. Like
No
they're
way.
gonna milk it
That
like
game
crazy.
sold terribly, dude. There's no we
Oh, really? It
we
sold
have a
that?
better
No.
we have a better chance of getting like Soul Hackers 3 than we actually no. Soul Hackers
Oh
probably
man.
sold worse, but no. Tactica bombed like really bad. Like there's a reason
Damn.
if you try and buy a copy of Persona 5 Tactica right now, like they're like $5. They're like bargain bin.
Wow, dude, that game's good.
It
That's a
it, it is. There was a store near me. Like it's one of those like they'll like find overflow stock from stores where like, all right, well we can't clearance it out, but like if we sell it to this other company, they can sell it for like stupid cheap. 3 months after Tactica came out, they were selling Switch and PS4 copies for $10, and I was
wow.
like, all right, who can I buy this for? Who wants this game for cheap? Because it was like, it was just a thing of like, yeah, there's like, it was that sign of okay, it sold enough to probably make its money back, but it just completely came and went. Nobody talks about it. There's no real fervor, which
Mm-hmm.
is like a shame. But again, it's that whole thing of like, yeah, dude, like you released a game at a bad time. It's like, it's nice that Sega's at least being a little more flexible. Like the fact that they moved Yakuza for Monster Hunter is really smart, but
Yeah.
also, why have they not done that with other games? Because yeah, there were so many games that just like even earlier this year. Why did Yakuza 8 and Persona 3 release 7 days from each other?
Yeah, I don't know what that's like Square Enix kind of stuff. They always do stuff like that as well. I don't know what they're doing. Like,
Yeah, so
space them out.
yeah, if Persona 5 Tactica 2 ever happens, I will fully. I'll do the cutting of my pinky or whatever like I have to do to like make up for this make up for this Sid. But yeah, there's no way in hell that game is ever getting a sequel. And I love that game, but I'm like, they were like, well, this was a fun, cheap experiment and nobody bought it, so let's move on with our lives.
Damn, what a bummer.
Yeah, like the only time that game gets mentioned in sales is like the Persona 5 series. They've never once been like, oh, it sold 100,000 copies. It was like sold. I think the closest it was like it was really soft sales in Japan, and then it like fell off completely the second week, and it didn't. I don't even think it charted on NPDs in the West.
Wow, brutal.
I mean, listen, it's like it's kind of like the dancing games. Like, obviously not in terms of quality, but it's like you can't just slap Persona 5 blah 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 and expect it to sell the same amount that it is. That was actually like my biggest worry with Metaphor. I was like, all right, well, obviously Metaphor is going to be a good game. That's a terrible name. Like, is this game gonna sell? Because I'm like, this is an awful name.
Yeah, it is. It's a really bad name, but I don't know. It seemed to do pretty well.
Oh, dude, the fact that it outsold P3R on Steam is like, I'm like, that's insane to me.
Yeah. I'm really happy about it. So that's great.
I think that with that was like whatever intern had blackmail and was able to get that public demo for everybody at TGS, like that like 7-hour long demo was the smartest thing of advertising they could do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a really good idea to do for most RPGs or long games like that.
What about Vengeance? Have you had any morbid curiosity
to
try any Blue Hair
I
action?
played some of 5. I played like 30 hours when it came out, and that was enough for me.
That's like half the game. What do you mean you played some of it? That's like half the game right there.
Yeah, well, some of it. I guess, like, not all of it, but like half of it, I guess. And I think that's enough for me from SMT 5.
Did it just not click with you?
At the time, it didn't have enough narrative to keep me really invested for how long it was. I think the combat's really good, and of course that's kind of like the main thing. But I think also playing it on Switch, it felt kind of real old at the time and didn't run super great as I wanted it to. I think it's a good game, but I just kind of wasn't in the mood to finish it at the time.
So if those were your complaints outside of the Switch part, if you were not a fan of how light the narrative is, The Vengeance will not fix that for you. There's more story, but it is still very much like like same ilk of like, yeah, it's a game that's very big on themes and concepts, but especially if you're coming from something like honestly every other Atlus game, like that was kind of the funny thing with it. It's like it's very traditional in that Dragon Quest kind of sense of like, they know the kind of game they're making. They've adapted it and they made it modern in a lot of different ways, especially with like the open world design. But yeah, like if you're going in it for a gripping narrative, it's gonna make you think more than it's actually gonna tell you, which I know not everybody loves.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about like having like a really amazing story or anything like that where I need it constantly. I just think it just needed more narrative, I guess, for me to get more invested into it, because it is a long ass game and a challenging game. I mean, there's difficulties, but it can be a challenge.
Oh no, that game is hard. I remember reviewing that game, and I was like, "Holy!" I had to like ask other people who were reviewing it. I'm like, "Is this hard like on normal?" I was like, "Damn, bro," because like this was in the era of like everyone complaining that P5 was too easy. So like going back to like get a real hard ass like kind of Nocturne experience was sort of nice. It was like it was nostalgic getting one shot at again. It was like, oh man, I missed this feeling.
Yeah, and I think just with how many games there are, I still need to play. It'd be kind of hard for me to go back to SMT 5 to give it like a full another shot.
I would say if you ever kind of get to, and obviously this will never happen because even this year it's like, yeah, we still have like 9,000 other games coming out. I would say Vengeance is still definitely the best way to play it. Like, never go back to the original.
Yeah.
It has a lot of quality of life stuff that's nice. The new playthrough is cool. And then also, they at least didn't do the Persona 5 Royal thing of they added a bunch of new story content, but you have to beat the base game to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was smart that they added just a completely new path you can do from the beginning. The problem is, for those people out there who wanted more of a kind of steady storytelling, they made a completely separate playthrough, but it basically feels like they took what could have been one really tight story and they split it into 2 playthroughs, and they had to stretch them out to be the same length as the first game. So it's that thing of like, there's a really great story once you've completed both, but like if you only played one of the 2, because like there's Canon of Creation, which is the original game, and then there's Canon of Vengeance, which is all the new stuff. Like if you only ever played one of those, you would probably go away being like, yeah, I have a lot more questions that this game did not answer. Yeah. Which is not ever what you want to walk away from an RPG after playing like 80 hours.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
So it's definitely been helped out a lot. I will say, the fact that it is getting free DLC like story missions, and like they just added a new demon last week, completely out of the blue, is very wild, and the fact that it looks like they're going to be doing more is extra cool. Thank God that game sold well. That's like a game I really love, but if anyone ever plays SMT5 and they're like, yeah, it's not like, if you're looking for a Persona, SMT5 is not just more Persona.
Yeah, I think I like the elements of Persona more than just proper SMT. I think SMT is great on its own, and I'm happy it is what it is, but I think I just gravitate more towards the Persona style of their games.
It changes from game to game, because there's a lot of ones I could recommend to you, like 4 and Apocalypse on 3DS are very narrative heavy. Like they have a great start. It's one of those ones, if you have an ensemble that's with you almost the entirety of the game, so you're kind of having that narrative a lot more, versus like SMT 3 and 5 are really similar, but they both start with you in a desert, and it's just you by yourself for hours on end. Like you'll run into characters every now and then, but like you're never really having those long moments. Whereas like SMT4 and Apocalypse both do a really good job of like having a more kind of consistent narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got to play it on the 3DS, and nobody wants to do that. So we'll wait till Analog puts out a 3DS in 20 years, and then people will be like, damn, Andy, awesome. Have you heard of this SMT4 game? This game's pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's see, what is another one? How much did you end up actually getting to play of Reload earlier this year?
Reload? I think I played 25 hours, I think.
See, that's where you could say I didn't get very far. 25 hours in Persona 3 Reload is like, oh, so you got through like, what, 40 floors of Tartarus?
Yeah. I absolutely hate Tartarus, so it's a big grind for me. So I don't enjoy that.
It's funny you say that, even though you've played, because like when people are like, oh, I hate Tartarus, but they've only played Reload, I'm like, oh, dude, Reload is like the best version of Tartarus.
Yeah, it is. It is the best version.
Like the fact that like everything looks visually way more interesting. There's way more designs. Like there's way more dungeon variations and like things of like, oh man, yeah, like going and playing like P3P and playing those original dungeons. It's like, oh yeah, it's a turn your brain off, get a podcast or listen to an audiobook kind of a thing of like, you're never going through Tartarus for the first time in those games, even remotely hooked, versus it like with Reload, it's a little bit better, but like, I think kind of depending on who you are, I think for me, especially if you're playing the DLC, I actually probably prefer Tartarus to Mementos, just because I think Mementos was that thing of like, it's bigger, but because you're burning through it so quickly, it's so empty, and you definitely kind of get to that point where like you never really feel like you have to be mentally active in Mementos, whereas like Tartarus can still kill you.
Yeah, I think just with, at least in 5, you had the palaces, which were really much better in my opinion, how they're designed and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I don't really like Mementos either. But at least
someone was like, guys, what if Tartarus was red and upside down?
Yeah, wow. So I was very happy I didn't find anything like that in Metaphor. An equivalent.
Oh man, yeah, I know. Like, and I mean, the closest we have to it are like the little side dungeons that are optional. Yeah. But like even those, it's like it's like the closest equivalent I always think to it is like the kind of side dungeons in like Bloodborne and Elden Ring. It's like, yeah, you know,
Mm-hmm.
they're not like handcrafted or like as well designed as the main ones, but like they at least are more fun to go through. Like you're never just like, okay, where's the stairs? Where's the stairs? Where's the stairs?
Right. Yeah. They're much more easier to get through, like you were saying. Yeah, just much more brief, better design, honestly. At least there's like some crawl spaces or something to do in the dungeons. I don't know. There's something.
There was, yeah, because I feel like even with my playthrough, and I mean, I'd be shocked if this kind of changes, but like there's never been a dungeon in my like 25 hours of Metaphor where I'm like, oh, I don't want to get all the treasure. I'm like, I
Right.
always
Yeah.
want to, even no matter if I'm in a main dungeon or like a small dungeon, I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I see everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
No gold beetle left unturned. You got to get everything.
Yeah.
Um, so for you, was it just sort of that thing of like, okay, cool, I've played Persona 3 before, the
Yeah.
remake was nice, but the gameplay of Tartarus just turned me off?
Kind of in like the narratives, like I think one of the best parts of 3, and of course like the characters. And it's like I know these characters' story, I know where stuff's going already, so it wasn't as exciting for me this time around
I
because
really
I'm
like
playing
that
it.
Shinji guy. I can't wait to see what happens to him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. Because I was playing it, and I was like, man, maybe I should just play Persona 5 Royal at this point.
Oh no. I mean, I get it for sure. What's funny was like I was one of those people who was like, I don't want a remake of this game. I like Persona 3. I did not think it needed a remake. I was like, it's fine the way it is. We've got all of our different versions. And even then, like knowing that this wasn't like, it's not like the version of Portable and Fez baked into one. I was
Mm-hmm.
so shocked playing that game of like, the more I played it, I was like, damn, they brought over enough quality of life changes from Persona 5 that it's like, yeah, because it's like, it's just the thing of like, yeah, it is still Persona 3 at the end of the day, but all of those little changes they brought over from Persona 5 are so nice that I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'll go back to play Portable, but like this is like, without a doubt, it's like, yeah, no, this is the best way to play this game,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
hands down.
yeah. I think it's a really great version of the game. Absolutely. It's just I've been there already, so and like the gameplay is still really good, but I just got other stuff I could probably play that I haven't done yet.
Oh my god, I also forgot the expansion pack. Like
Mm-hmm.
the fact, like 2 months ago they released a like 40 to 50 hour long epilogue DLC for that game, which I
Yeah.
feel. By the way, the fact that they released that a month before Metaphor is like, I feel like no one's gonna remember that the answer came out this year.
Yeah, I think so too as well. I forget how
As
much was that also.
well, yeah, that was also the thing with it, was you couldn't buy it a la carte. You had to buy it in like a weird season pass. So it was altogether was 35, which
Okay.
is like, here's the funny thing I tell people is like, people will bitch about the price of the answer
Mm-hmm.
because it's a season pass. But if I told you that it was just $35 for the answer, no one would complain.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thing of like, yeah, dude, it's like a 30 to 40 hour long epilogue. It's like, it's got all the same production value of like all the voice acting. Like, there's probably more voice acting in the first 30 hours of the answer than Metaphor. Like, there is so
Mm-hmm.
much. Like, they did not like skimp on the animated cutscenes. There's all this new music, new costumes, and a whole bunch of stuff. Like, they put so much work into that it was like, okay, yeah, I understand why they wouldn't have included it the first time. Like, it was a lot of stuff they had to do, and they did very little, especially because like in the beginning, like in the original version of the answer, like, did you ever play that on PS2?
The answer, no, I don't think so, because the one I actually beat was Portable. And I
Yeah,
don't
and
think
then
that
that
was
one
in
doesn't
there.
have it.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I
So
haven't.
the answer is fine, but the answer, especially for at the time, it was like, all right, now I'm gonna make a comparison that then also could lead to something half the chat might not know about. Did you ever play, or have you seen Final Fantasy X-2 had this weird thing in the international version and then in the HD version where it was like a roguelike mode. It was like,
No, I
it was
I've only
this
played the PS2 one, the
it was this
version.
crazy long actual story campaign using all of the assets of like Final Fantasy X-2, but it was like a roguelike, like a top-down dungeon crawling like roguelike sort of game. And they just used all these assets from the base game to make this like 30-hour campaign, and like that was sort of in the thing at the time. So that's very much like what the answer was. It was like, okay, we'll make Aigis playable, but like there were very few new demons, there were very few new animations, and outside of a couple of like animated cutscenes and story bits, a lot of it is just you're going through more Tartarus, but now it's the basement. So it's like, yeah, if you didn't like Tartarus, you're definitely not going to like the answer.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they actually trimmed it down, so the new version of the answer actually is more fun to play through than the original. Because the whole thing with the answer back in the day was they were like, oh well, you guys like this, so we'll just make like every floor is like 50 floors. You got to go through like 500 floors again. It's like, no, we're here for the story. Like, so they added new story, they trimmed down the amount of floors you have to go through, but they still kept all those things of like, here's new demons, here's new animations, here's new music. So like, all in all, it's a great package, and I think like more people will get to it eventually. It's just that thing of like, yeah, like there are more 100+ hour RPGs this year than most people have time or fingers to count them with.
Right. Yeah.
So like it's an easy recommendation. It's just that weird one of like, yeah, like who has the time? But like no one I know who's played it, myself included, walked away from it being like, okay, that wasn't worth including and that wasn't worth the price of admission. Like they did the rare thing, cuz like this is like a big first for them. Like they've never done DLC this late after a release that was paid and had this much new content.
Okay. Interesting.
So, and I mean, again, they could have just waited a year, make it a Switch 2 launch game, and charged us $70 for it. So at least they gave it to us as an option for DLC.
Yeah. Well, they'll probably do that anyways. You'll get another version of 3.
That was a funny one of people being like, why is Persona 3 not on the Switch? And I'm like, listen, if we can get SMT 5 to run on the Switch, yeah, they probably could have gotten it to run on the Switch. Like, right. Persona 3 Reload is pretty, but it's not like it can't run on the Switch pretty.
Yeah. I agree.
I guess, yeah, kind of like the last bit, though, for Metaphor, just sort of, since it's the most fresh for you, for you, we're getting there. Are you toying with the idea? Is it in the GOTY realm? Like, where's it at for you? Kind of fresh off beating it, but not obviously. It's been like a little bit of time for you.
Yeah. I would say it's probably my second favorite game this year. Rebirth's my favorite.
That's the thing, man.
I'd put
Rebirth's gonna be so hard to beat. Like, that's so much game. Like Rebirth, I remember beating that the first time. I was like, I felt like I just played 3 games at once.
Yeah. yeah. But no, yeah, Metaphor I adored. I have some some nitpicks with it, but I thought it was an awesome game.
Too political, man. Get those politics out.
No, not even that. I think just my kind of complaints with that game is it just kind of feels old in some ways.
Oh, like 100%.
Yeah, I was just like, I guess that's just Atlus with their RPGs.
Digital Foundry on, and we both agree. Like, this is the best looking PS3 game of the year.
Yeah. I just kind of wish they would like take that huge leap. I mean, they do have leaps between games, and you can tell, but I'm just kind of always hoping it's bigger every time. But other than that,
what did you play Metaphor on?
I played it on PS5.
Okay, so the funny thing is with that was I loved how even with how dated it looked on PS5, it still couldn't keep a steady 60 FPS.
I know, it's really, yeah, I was noticing it too. I'm like, what's going on here, guys? Come on.
I feel like that's got to be one of those things that because like now that the pro's out, we know. So I know you've beaten it, so you probably won't go back anytime soon. It runs at a flawless 60 FPS.
I know, yeah.
So
I did hear that. I was like,
they probably just had a dev kit and they were like, "Oh, I'm sure it's fine on PS5. It'll be fine. It'll be fine."
I did. Yeah, I was like, "Damn, dude." Especially because this game's on last gen as well. It's on PS4 and Xbox.
It had One. No Xbox One.
No Xbox.
Yeah, PS4, but Series X only.
Right.
It was funny though. It did the Elden Ring thing of like, if you were a frame rate snob, you could play PS4 on PS5, and but then it's gonna look uglier. It's like,
I know.
Listen, dude, the whole reason I'm playing this game is like mostly for the vibes and the presentation. Like, I feel like, especially like I know it wavers as the game kind of goes through. It was never steady, but it at least was never that thing of like, oh man, like it never felt rough. It was like, oh, you're almost there.
Yeah. It wasn't like it didn't stop me from playing the game or enjoying anything like that. But it was noticeable at some times, but nothing like egregious, I would say.
That's kind of actually, it makes me think of a similar one. When is the last time you played Persona 5 Reload? Not Reload, Royal.
Royal, I played it when it came out for a little bit.
Okay, so you haven't played. Have you played or messed around with any of the releases they did when they put it on Switch, Xbox, PC, and made it 60 FPS?
I played the PS5 version, yeah.
Okay. I was curious, like, so one of my biggest takeaways when I played that version that I was shocked how few people kind of mentioned was like, that was a game that I was like, okay, this could have been 60 FPS, even maybe at the very least on like PS4 Pro, but you could tell because that was originally supposed to be a PS3 game that like, oh, well, a lot of it just had to be locked to 30 FPS. That then when they finally released the remastered version and they let it be 60 FPS, it just felt like you were playing the game on turbo mode. Like all the animation looks so out of whack.
Yeah. Wait, wasn't 5 was on PS3 in Japan, wasn't it?
And in the West, we got a physical
West,
copy
yeah.
and everything. That was like the last PS3 game anyone cared about. Like there was like FIFA and a couple other ones, but like that was a 2017 North American. You can find like physical copies of it. Surprisingly, it's not that rare. That's like one of those ones I'm like, I need to add this to my collection just in like the weird, like this is a weird novelty.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess when you're like, then there's like older gen versions of it, you kind of expect it to run at like 60 frames or something like that, or at least put in like a performance mode or a fidelity mode, whatever.
Oh no, man! Even Metaphor doesn't have that. Metaphor's like, no, you're good.
I know
You're fine.
they still got a ways to go to get there.
They've got to idiot proof it. They're like, I don't know, man. Like, do they know what perform? Like maybe they think performance and visual are the same thing. I will say though, the fact that when the game was like officially shown off, I think at the Xbox show last year, I remember the second I saw gameplay footage, I laughed hysterically because I could instantly tell it was still being made on the P5 engine, like from the PS3.
Yeah. You could definitely tell. It looked rough in some way.
Well, it was just so funny of like, and I mean, yeah, that debut trailer too, like that was so framey, that original one, that I was like, wow, you guys have got some confidence to show this game looking this jittery. But again, it's like they knew what they had, and it got a lot better leading up to release, thankfully. But it was just so funny of like, that was like, we haven't seen like engine reuse like this since like Bethesda.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know, and it's just so funny because like they literally, like, Persona 3 Reload came out this year on Unreal Engine 4. Like, it's not like they don't work with other engines, but it's like, you know, that like they were like, all right guys, you can get 6 months more development time if you stick with this engine, or we can switch you to Unreal Engine 5. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'd have to learn. I mean, let's just stick with the old one. It'll be fine. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if like we get to like 20 years from now, someone like finds a PS3 version of Metaphor somewhere. They're like, well, I found a way to like demake it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
But no, I mean, we talk. I mean, even with like you and I both having like Rebirth as like our current like front runner of like games of the year for it, I will say, I will be kind of shocked if there's any other company this year that has as many high quality games as Atlus this year. Like this year for me is like, hey, you guys could just kind of like take a break next year. Like, you guys probably don't need to release anything else.
Yeah, I agree. They've had an awesome year. Really great stuff. I've played some of Unicorn Overlord, and I think it's really good. So
I feel so bad, dude. I bought that game very late, and I remember I downloaded the demo, but I was either really busy or like, no, I was still playing Reload. That was the thing. I was like, hold on, what was I doing? It's like I was still playing Reload by the time Unicorn came out. I have still not even started that game. And like, I love Vanillaware, and I'm like, I don't even know when I'm gonna get to this, because I'm like, I could do it after Metaphor, but I have like 19 other games calling at me. But it's like that one I want to get to. Like, how did you enjoy Unicorn Overlord though?
For what I played of it, I really enjoyed. Like I said, I like tactical RPGs a lot. I mean, it's not grid-based tactical or anything like that, but, and of course it's Vanillaware, so it's gorgeous to look at. So
did you play much 13 Sentinels?
I didn't really like 13 Sentinels that much, but I've played many Vanillaware games. Like, I love Dragon's Crown. Dragon's Crown is like my favorite one from them.
So the funny thing is, I loved 13 Sentinels not as much as everybody else did, but what was funny was that game was another one of it was in development for so long that
Hmm.
originally when you were going to go into the battles with the mechs, you could actually see the animations of you in the mechs fighting, but eventually they were like, oh well, it would either take too long to animate all these different battles, and they just kind of went with like a very basic sort of polygonal zoomed out look for the map, which was fine, but it was not very satisfying visually to look at. And I remember like when they showed off Unicorn Overlord, I was like, this is what I wanted. I was like, I wanted to see large armies in their art style fighting each other, and you can actually see the attacks because like their art style is just so good to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of disappointed with that in that game. I wish they had battle animations and stuff. That was like my least favorite part of the game.
Oh yeah, the fact that there's like a Tartarus mode in 13 Sentinels, and it's like I remember I looked it up because it's 999 levels
Oh my
of that
god.
gameplay. And it was like the Korok seed of like, okay, I won't do this without looking up what you get.
Right.
And then I found out there was like one dude on YouTube who just streamed himself playing it for like 48 hours, and he finally beat it, and there was no reward. He just got extra current. It's like,
Oh
cool. It's like, bro,
man.
like, listen, I don't know who I have to tell it Vanillaware. Like, guys, your combat was not that fun. No one be
Yeah.
like, damn, bro, I just wish there was 900 more levels of Tartarus for me to run around.
It's crazy. Jeez.
And I mean, listen, there are those people out there. Like, I get it. Like, I think if maybe they had just like described it as like a survival mode, and then it stopped at 1,000 levels, that'd be one thing. But like, it was
Hmm.
like, yeah, you could play through. There were easy, medium, and hard levels, and then there was like this infinity kind of dungeon thing you would unlock. They did. I mean, they did a similar thing with Dragon's Crown like a couple of months after it released. Do you remember when they updated and they added that like really really tall almost like it had an ending, but it was kind of like a Tartarus dungeon for Dragon's Crown.
Yeah, I vaguely remember it. I
Like
played it
that
right
was
when
one
it
of like,
came
hey,
out.
there was stuff to unlock. It was more levels
Hmm.
without them having to really like make like story missions behind it. Like that was the kind of game that like, hey, I would want to invite friends over and do 4-player co-op and do this.
Right.
A visual novel with a very half-baked RTS system like 13 Sentinels is not the game I want to play 1,000
Right.
levels of.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Which is funny because there are people out there, wrong people, but there are people out there who will say that that's Vanillaware's best game, and they are
Damn.
very very loud about it, but they're wrong,
Damn.
unfortunately.
Wow.
I will say though, people have said, and I mean it makes sense because like I feel like if you look at Unicorn Overlord, it does literally look like they're just taking the best of Dragon's Crown and the best of 13 Sentinels and making it into one game.
Yeah. Definitely. Aesthetically, especially. Yeah.
That one I feel like though I think sales wise it did fine. Like I mean, Vanillaware's whole thing always makes me like laugh and cry at the same time. Of like every game that comes out, there's always a Famitsu interview where they're like, "Well, guys, we put literally everyone's money into this game, so if it doesn't make our money back, we will have to shut down." So it's like you at least know Vanillaware is fine because like they didn't shut the studio down. But like that was definitely one of those games where I was like, man, I feel like really nobody talked about that game after like the first week or two. Like it reviewed well.
Mm,
People talked
yeah.
about like
I
I
think
mean
it
fuck
sold
it.
well. I
Even
saw it sold pretty
the
well.
fact that David Jaffe has played that game and I haven't, that should be a commendable statement.
I don't know if he's finished it, or maybe he did actually.
He
I'm not sure.
listen, he the fact that he has played that and I haven't. The guy who
Yeah, that
fucking
is
talks
surprising. I
Atlus every
suppose
week.
that is surprising. I guess. Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before the show started, but Dragon Quest about to come out.
Yep.
That's gonna suck up way too much of my time. And then I feel
Yep.
like again, I think it'll do well sales wise, but man, I'm really excited to play Fantasian.
Oh yeah, I'm really stoked for that as well. But
Do you have
I hope I'm done
any
with
other?
Dragon Quest. I hope I'm
Oh,
done
I
with
mean,
Dragon Quest by then.
have you played DQ3 before?
No, I've never played it.
Very short, like not like 10 hours short, but like it's like a sub 50-hour game.
Yeah, probably like people are telling me it's like 30 hours or something.
Yeah.
So
Dragon
sounds
Quest.
good.
That's why it's funny that 1 and 2, not that they're coming out after, but 1 and 2 are bundled together, and people are like, why are they bundling 1 and 2 and not all three? It's because 3 is the length of like a normal game. One, you could not just remake 1 and sell it. Like Dragon Quest 1 is
Right.
very short.
Yeah. Couldn't do it now.
But yeah, any other kind of games you're looking forward to, or things that are on your radar before the end of the year, or at least kind of before we get to GOTY season?
I'm hoping I can finish Infinite Wealth sometime soon. I've played like six
That's a
hours of it.
Dude, that's another one of like I cannot believe how long that game is, and the fact that that
I
game came out
know,
this year.
I
How
know,
how far are
man.
you into it so far? Like, what
I'm
chapter
only
are you
like
on?
6 hours. I don't remember which chapter, maybe 3 or something like that. I
So
got a ways to go.
that was one I was like, I love Yakuza. I have every game in the series. I did not buy that game, I think, until maybe August of this year, because I was like, I knew with how close it was coming out to Persona 3, I was like,
Hmm.
there is literally no reason for me to buy this game right now. It's
Right,
like,
yeah.
and what was funny is because like how quickly Sega games go on sale. I bought it physically. I got it on Amazon, brand new PS5, a physical copy for $20, and it was
Oh,
originally
nice.
70.
Yeah, wow. Nice.
And I still haven't even opened it. It's still in the string grab. I'm like, all
Hmm.
right. I mean, because like, for $20, I'm like, yeah, I've got no reason not to buy it. It's not going to get
Yeah,
any cheaper than 20
yeah.
bucks. But Yakuza 8 is one I'm really curious to get to, just because it's not universally loved. Like 7, I still need to beat that as well. Like 7 and 8 are just so long. But the
Hmm.
thing that's funny about 8 is like I've heard from so many people who are like, I love 8. I think it's the best. It's a great one. And then other people who are like, it's way too bloated. Multiple protagonists does not help the story overall for it. So like, I'm just really kind of curious of like where I'm gonna land on there so far, just because like
Yeah.
I was nervous when they announced Kiryu in the game, not because they were bringing him back, more of just being like, this is really hard to manage, even in like a 100-hour game.
Yeah. Well, I've been kind of burnt out on Yakuza games for a little bit because there's so many and they
Dude, they
come
got to
out very
they've
close to
got
each
to
other.
they've got to chill.
Yeah, they've
There's a
got to
new one
chill.
out in 3 months.
I know. It's like The Man Without a Name came out like last December or something like that. Then Infinite Wealth came out this year, and now we got
Don't forget,
another one like a
Ishin
year
was
later.
also last year
Yeah,
too.
and Ishin. Yeah, it's insane. It's like they're all really great games, but man, I just gotta take my time with those.
Well, we're gonna wrap this up kind of in reverse order. We've got two little bit of news things, but I mostly kind of want to like pick your brain for it because I'm curious if you even know these exist, let alone let everyone else kind of know about it.
Hmm.
Brad, for you, where do you stand when it kind of comes to playing like tabletop RPGs as well as board games?
I'm okay with them. Don't have a lot of experience playing them. I would say like not a lot of my friends had them growing up, but I think they're cool. I just don't have a ton of experience with them.
So this week, did you know that there was a official Shin Megami Tensei board game that got put up on Kickstarter?
No, I feel like there's a board game for everything though,
There
so it
is,
doesn't
but here's
surprise
the
me.
here's the wild thing with this. So this is a 1 to 4 player board game that comes with minifigs. There are 70 minifigs in it of different demons.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. So then here's what your next question should be. Oh dear God, how expensive is it?
Yeah, how much? 300?
300 was for the first 1,000 early bird.
Oh,
So that's long gone. So
yeah.
MSRP. Well, actually, no. Actually, it just is only on Kickstarter. So if this ever goes to retail, it'll be more than this. It is $400 if you want to back it right now.
Oh my god. Wow.
Oh, here we go. So here's like a quick little thing for it. So you get a double-sided board for like game board playing. There's 72 figures, 140 cards, uh, up to 4 players, 200 chips and tiles, 50 markers and die, and the game comes in English and Japanese. So like you can play like either language.
Hmm.
So I was excited when this got announced. This got announced like earlier in the summer. It got weirdly delayed. It was supposed to be kickstarted back in September and then just got pushed back 2 months. And it just went up for Kickstarter this week. In 2 days, it has already raised over $500,000.
Wow, jeez. That's
Which,
impressive.
I mean, it's impressive. Also, I mean, at that price tag, that's still less than 2,000
I
people
know.
bought it, which is hilarious. It's
Yeah.
like, holy shit, that's so much. Like, dude, there are games that don't even get this much for a Kickstarter, like video
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
I'm at least I'm happy. I knew it was going to get funded. I am shocked at how quickly it's blown up because this is from a company who's not done this before. It's like this is their first board game. And then even more shocking is like that Sega licensed this and let them do a Kickstarter. Because a
Wow.
lot of the times when Sega, God love them, they will license out anything. They will, if you want to
Yes.
put Sonic on a golf course, you want to put Persona condoms, you can do whatever you want. They do not care. If you pay
Mm-hmm.
them, they will let you do whatever you want. So the fact that they let this company do a Kickstarter was really surprising for two reasons. One, it was like a first time thing, they've never done this before, and two, because earlier this year, Lion Wing announced they were doing a Shin Megami Tensei, specifically Nocturne, tabletop RPG, like a D&D campaign book.
Hmm.
So here's the
Cool.
weird thing with this, not to like put you down a rabbit hole forever. This is actually not a brand new RPG. This is a translation from a RPG book that was written in Japan 20 years ago.
Wow. 20 years
So
ago?
they
Jeez.
they found the original license holders. They found the original author of it in Japan. They got all the rights. They got all the art. They have translated it in English. They're making hardcover copies. And this week, the hardcover copies got delayed till like early next year. But like the PDF for it finally came out because it's like, well, it's already all done. The original release date was supposed to be this month, but they released the PDF this month. So if you pre-ordered it on their website or if you want now, you can start playing it. But it was just so funny of like when we invited them on to have an interview about, oh, what was the process like of, because like I'm aware of like what publishing a video game is like and licensing older video games and even books, but like
Mm-hmm.
not with like 20-year-old tabletop RPG books that were only ever in Japan.
Right.
Because like the wildest thing is most people probably don't even know that there was an SMT tabletop RPG. The wildest thing is like I think there's like 8 or 9 that only ever released in
Oh.
Japan. Like there was a ton. Like, did you know there was an SMT card game?
No.
Yes, there's a multiple. Like they did sets all the way up from the 90s all the way to Nocturne. So it's this like collectible card game that has cards from Persona 1, 2, Soul Hackers, SMT 1. There's even like a Nocturne ones as well. Like they went all the way up until that.
Wow. That's crazy. I had
Yeah.
no idea.
And what's really funny is like talking to the people kind of behind those projects. One of the big ones, especially the tabletop RPG, was the thing that this company does. Their name is Lion Wing, is they've mostly done for a lot of their bigger projects, and like a lot of companies do this now. Especially, I think video games have strayed away from Kickstarter just kind of due to the reputation not being as great. But for board games and like tabletop games, it's a lot easier because most people are like, hey, if you already have the game done, you're really just kind of using Kickstarter as like a pre-order website, you know?
Right.
So they went to Atlus and they were like, "Hey, can we get the rights for this?" They said, "Sure, we'll license it, do whatever." And they're like, "Great, can we do a Kickstarter?" And they told them no.
Oh.
They were like, "Oh no, yeah, like people are gonna think that this looks bad if we do a Kickstarter because they're gonna be like, Sega, what do you mean? You have Sonic the Hedgehog money. Why are you making
Right.
it company?" It's kind of like, and this happened to a much lesser extent, but like, do you remember when like Shenmue got announced and there
Oh
were a
yeah.
few people out there who were like, "Why is this on the Sony stage for a Kickstarter?"
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
So it's kind of like that in the sense of like, yeah, does Bloodborne the video game need to have a Kickstarter for a board game? No, but people just kind of do it just sort of that's what it is. So like it was really funny like 3 months after that interview I had with him, they announced that board game and then oh hey, it's on a Kickstarter and then unsurprisingly, yeah, less than 2 days later they almost have they have over $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like so weird, and like a lot of this is like, okay, maybe this was like an Atlas Japan versus like an Atlas West thing, but like it's just one of those funny ones of like, hey, I wanted to let everyone know that the PDF is out for the tabletop game and the board game is out for the other one. The funny thing is like I feel like for the tabletop game, it's a lot less of a endeavor because like have you ever done like any D&D campaigns or any like tabletop games?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd played D&D for a while.
So like D&D is like, yeah, like you just got to suck it up and buy like a $50 book and then you can just play. Like
Right.
the most expensive thing to do then is find a coffee table to play it on.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like the board game, which is funny, is like the board game with the 70 minifigs and everything else that's in it is like, yeah, it's like going to be like a $400 purchase. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
when people saw that price, what was funny was like, I've not really bought any of these like really elaborate games. Like I've been tempted before. Like there's some really interesting ones. Like there's a Metal Gear Solid one. The Bloodborne one I've heard is really cool as well. Like I've been wanting to check them out, but it's that thing of like, yeah, they are really expensive, and it's like
Yeah.
for someone like me who like I just live with my wife. I'm like, all right, well I want this eventually, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, even someone like me, I'm like, I don't know how I could justify this. So like, I kind of was talking to some friends. I was like, I feel like we should just treat this like a timeshare. Like, let's just get 4 people to pitch in $100, and then we can be like, all right, well, we'll just share this game and like play it every now and then. Because like otherwise, it's like, yeah, I don't know how you justify that like for $400 unless you have like a really hardcore group of people you're constantly playing board games with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a big investment.
But yeah, can I interest you in a timeshare investment for $400, Brad? Are you in the market?
I think I'm okay. I think I'm good.
That was the real reason I invited you here, was to try and get more people to help me kick this on Kickstarter. Well, damn. Well, if you got time for questions, I think that's pretty much it.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
All right, let's go to our fun well of questions we had online. First question comes from Dio Lixon, who says, do you think Atlus needs to make more of their past games readily available? I've been playing SMT 2 for the first time, and this is an all-time classic for me. It's a shame it's never been officially localized on any modern platforms.
I think it'd be great for them to do it. I would love to see all their old games because a lot of people haven't played those old games, like me. But if they do, they just got to make sure to release them at a good cadence where they're not stacked up or like weeks apart from each other. So ideally, yes, but just the release they got to be careful with.
It's tough because it's like, yeah, no one's going to say no to this question.
Right.
But the problem is like, kind of like we were mentioning of like, hey, yeah, you're going to port eventually Persona 1 and 2, but how are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Like, that's the tricky part with it. Like, I think another one that kind of slid under the radar during Tokyo Game Show, did you see that leak for the next HD game they're doing?
No.
So this is hilarious, by the way. I don't know any, like, Sega, every time I think they know how to fuck up an announcement and leak their own game, they always find new ways to surprise me, and it's fantastic. They don't like that I tell them that, but it is very funny. A week before TGS, the Steam version of Nocturne HD got updated, and all of the achievements were replaced with achievements for Devil Survivor 1 and 2, the Raito Kuzunoha games on PS2. So those are the next ones that are coming out. And it's like, yeah, if the achievements are done, kind of like we were talking about earlier, yeah, that game's probably ready. Yeah, it's just more of a matter of when will it get announced or how. But it was just so funny that it, especially because it didn't get announced at TGS, which, I mean, again, it wouldn't have made sense to announce it at TGS. It was like Metaphor is still coming out, a bunch of other things. They got 19 other Yakuza games that are coming out first. But, like, Devil Survivor 1 and 2 are very weird choices. Like, have you ever played those games? So they are kind of similar to Strikers. It is a action RPG with demon summoning mechanics. So you're still collecting, you're still negotiating with demons, but instead of it being a turn-based game, it's a lot more of kind of like a slow, methodical action RPG. It's definitely like, it's one of those ones of like, if you like it, you'll love it. But if you're not into it, I will not be surprised. But it's one of those cool ones because that one has such a cool vibe of like this sort of pre-post World War II era Japan with like that SMT sort of like vibe with it. It's a really unique world, and then the soundtrack for it is fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, sounds cool.
It's a cool one. I will be curious how it does, especially just because with them, when they did the Nocturne HD remaster, that one made sense because it was leading up to 5. I think everyone sort of thought that their next one they were going to do, though, was going to be like Digital Devil Saga, because like that was the ones that came out after it, and it's a duology. It plays very similar to Nocturne and, by matter of fact, Persona. So the fact that they're like doing the black sheep of them is super weird, because like these were really late releases. Like Devil Summoner 2 came out after Persona 4.
Oh wow, that's really late. Then.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where there's a really funny misconception with Devil Summoner 2. Like if you ever Google it, if you type in like Devil Summoner 2 Collector's Edition, you'll see it was like this box with the PS2 on one side, like the PS2 disc, and then like a big Jack Frost plush on the left. And everyone was always like, oh man, this was like one of the best collector's editions of all time. No, that was the regular copy. Like if you bought it for $50, that's what every copy looked like at launch, because it was 2008, and they were like, who the fuck's gonna buy a PS2 game in 2008?
Yeah.
They were like, we gotta throw in everything we can to this.
Yeah, jeez.
So I think it's gonna happen. Obviously, it's just a tricky one of like, if you're the big wigs in charge, like what do you think makes the most sense? Like I assume for you, like, is if you were Mr. Sega man in charge of the board, are you just like, all right guys, let's just fart out Persona 1 and 2 already?
No, not fart them out or whatever. I think quality is the most important thing, especially for a series like that. So I would try to take my time with them and get like two. I think putting them both out at the same time would be great, though. Like kind of like what they're doing with Dragon Quest, getting 1 and 2 together like that maybe would be really awesome. But yeah,
that is tough, because yeah, I'm like I wonder if they would have would they be able to do both at the same time, or I almost wonder if they would do like the pixel remaster release method of like, even if they don't make them like a full remake like that, where they release one Innocent Sin and then Eternal Punishment, and then they'll like put them all together in one bundle when all three are done, just to get them out more spread apart. Because it's that thing of like, even if they release Persona 1 and the 2 duology at once, I'm like, dude, that's like, again, that's like another 90 plus hours of games 3 times.
Yeah, maybe they could just do like one comes out, then 6 months later, second one comes out, or a year later, something like that. But once you could buy them at the same time if you want, or buy them a la carte.
Another question we've got. Oh man, I'm gonna butcher this guy's name. ABDIRAHMANSAID 2674. Who I always see. I see your name all the time, and I'm always like, man, am I glad I don't have to say that guy's name out loud. He says wish list for Persona 6. So it could be anything from the features, the settings, the age, whatever.
I would like it to be college kids, maybe. Or maybe adults in a workforce, I think would be very interesting. I think the high school setting's great and it works really well, but we've done it many, many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see them maybe go outside of that. Like college, I guess, would be like close enough to it. But it'd be cool if they expanded upon that a lot more. I would just want them, whatever the next game is, also to feel like a big leap production-wise. How we were talking about like Metaphor. Still like the best looking PS3 game kind of thing. I at least want to look like just one gen behind or something.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they're always going to have a hard time shaking that. Like, really, the last time I think Atlus has had a game that looked technically on an equal setting would be SMT 5, and that was only because it was a Switch exclusive. Yeah. Like if that released on multiplat at launch, people wouldn't be like, oh, I mean, it's stylistically really pretty, but because it was a Switch exclusive, there are so few Switch games that use Unreal Engine 4, especially like that game, that it helps it stand out a lot more.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I would like to see, I agree with you in terms of the setting and like the age. I will say something I don't see happening and something I do see possible. Number one, for the love of God, leave Japan. I don't know what you have to do. Bomb it. Well, probably not bomb it. I've heard that doesn't go well over there. But like, please leave Japan. You can start in Japan. You can visit Japan. You can make Japan the Hawaii of that game. Just please, for the love of God, go to a different setting. Because like, anytime Atlus does a game outside of Japan, the setting is always like the coolest part of it. Like Strange Journey, Catherine, like even Metaphor, like they do such a great job at making these worlds, and like I get why they want to do it, especially in these school settings. But it's like there are so like again, kind of like going back to like Pokemon, whether you love or hate Pokemon, I always kind of like a new generation because you never really know what that setting is going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a nice feeling of like, because like even when you play like Pokemon 1 and 2, because like I forget what it is, like which one is like for Kanto and which one is for Johto, but like they feel very based in Japan in terms of like kind of what their setting is, and that was always so nice of like going into like Diamond and Pearl and Black and White and like Scarlet and Violet of like how drastically different those regions feel.
Yeah.
That like I think that they could have a lot of success with there, even if it's not even like a real location. Like they could have like an international board school or like something like that where it's like just give more of a different environment that's not just going to feel like Tokyo. Because like again, I think you look at what people love about Persona 4. Persona 4 was okay, we're still in Japan, but it's small rural Japan, which you almost never see, especially back then.
Yeah. I wonder if a lot of people would like that, because I think a lot of people do like that set in Japan. But we've had so many Persona
I was
games.
getting
I'm fine with
not
it.
even just Persona. We have so many games in general that are Japan.
Yeah,
Like Japan is not
yeah.
like a
like always
"Ooh,
Tokyo.
wow."
Yeah.
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 Persona 6, first game in Ohio. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Now, one I can see them doing, and I really would like to see this, expand upon the calendar system in more meaningful ways. Like a big one that I want to see is my least favorite thing that happens in these games that have a daily calendar system are the filler days. Are the days where you have nothing to do, there is nothing you can even forward, or worse, when you have those time skip days where like, oh, well, you had a cold, so you missed a week and a half. And it just leads you being like, motherfucker, I had stuff I could have done. It's like, why are you making me lose a third of a month? This game doesn't even do 12 months. So like stuff like that, like having it feel more like a real calendar system where, hey, if I get a cold, I want to be the reason I got a cold. Like I want to be the one that makes me miss a day, not just the story be like, well, we couldn't think of anything to happen this week, so we're going to skip ahead a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. That'd be good.
And very tiny minor one, and I only say this because I know that they're never going to change. Please, if you're going to give a character multiple choices, make it actually matter. Like Persona is so guilty of being like, here are 3 things you can say and none of them mattering. Because like it's so funny of like these games have multiple endings, but how often do you ever hear anyone talk about like, oh yeah, what ending did you get? It's like, no, we all get the same ending.
Yeah, I would like that if you like choose, like, for example, I don't know, you choose a school or something like that, and that's your school for the playthrough, and the other one you don't get to see or something like that. I think it'd be really cool.
Because it's like, I love how they let you interact with like your social link relationships, but in terms of the story, they like they just never want to commit to it. They're like, this would be too drastic. That would, yeah. And like I get it. It's harder. It's like you look at something like Mass Effect, and you look like, oh, there's a reason they don't make games like this very much. It's because like it's hard, but it's memorable. People love how different those like especially those old BioWare games were. Like they were so different. Everyone's played through.
Yeah.
Limus says the story structure and especially type differs greatly between classic Persona, like 1 and the 2 duology, and modern, like 3 and onward. Which would you say you prefer if you've played them? And what do you think about many fans dismissing classic ones and only playing modern games?
Well, I haven't played the classic one, so I can't really say.
You should dismiss the first 3. That's I think the internet really loves when people do that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people haven't played them because they're not available easily. You can't really just kind of like buy them super easily, a lot of the games. So if they're more accessible, I think more people would try them out, definitely.
I think I 100% agree about the accessibility of like modern platforms. I always want to actually contest the question. People always like to assume because Persona 3, because Persona 4 and 5 are so popular, people not talking that way about the first 3 is them kind of dismissing it or not wanting to play them. I think a big part of it is like go back to, if you remember on the PSP when those games got remade, even though we didn't get all of them, people played them. People were excited about them. No one was like, "Oh, damn, I don't want to play Persona 4. I've got to play Persona 2 now." Like, when they were available, no one was ever talking about, "Well, why can't I play them?" It was only when we started moving to other console generations that we stopped having ways to play them. And I mean, like, even Atlus has been guilty of, like, they ported SMT1 once. They did a GBA emulation on iPhone, and they took it off the App Store because I think 7 people, myself included, bought it. But it was just one of those things of, like, yeah, like, when it's available and it's done well, people will buy it and support it. But just because people can't play it doesn't mean that people aren't interested in it. Like, I think you'll still see, like, Persona 3 is a great example. Yes, there were a lot of Persona 3 fans. Reload made it way bigger. It like completely brought so many new people over because people could be like, "Oh, great, it plays just like that game I was introduced to."
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, they just need a way for people to play them.
Brad, we've got a hard question here for you.
Okay.
What color will Persona 6 be? And you can't say green.
Purple?
Oh,
wait, that was the old ones, wasn't it?
Listen, dude, 2 was red, and then 5 was red, and then they tried to lie and say it was orange. They could go back and do purple.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like running out of colors, man.
They've done like 5. How have they run out of colors?
We're doing primary colors, at least. We're running out of. We're gonna have to start blending colors together. So that's purple, yeah, red and blue.
I love it too. It's like, oh damn, we've done 6 games, we're out of colors.
Yeah.
It's like Pokemon. Like, we thought they could do colors forever, and they just ran out. They just gave up.
Yeah, it's like you don't want to do brown or something like that.
I mean,
and it's like, come on.
Yeah, we're gonna have a Persona 6 Sepia.
Yeah, like salmon. It's like, I guess.
I think. Also, we can't do purple again because I just realized they've had 2 games do purple. Persona Q also was purple themed. I think there's a greater than 0 chance that they might be boring and make it black or white.
Yeah, that's possible. I think that could really happen.
I will be shocked if it's not green because of, like, their very, very obvious teasing about it. But at the same time, like, I think them getting away from colors might also be smart, just because it's that thing of, like, especially like Persona 4, like, you always associate it as yellow with the HUD, but never really as much the world. Persona 3, less so. Obviously, blue, we had a lot of blue skies, but it wasn't like, oh, Persona 3 is the blue game. I feel like we really started tying the colors to each one of the games, like, because Persona 5 was like, oh, that's the red game.
Yeah, maybe they can just do rainbow color or something. I don't know. Multicolor.
If Persona 6 was rainbow, I would dread / be very excited about how awful the internet would be that day. That was like some random tweet I remember they made for Metaphor. It was so funny about being like, they made like some tweet about like, oh, because your party's diverse. Like, literally, your party is literally diverse in Metaphor. And people on Twitter were like, oh man, forced diversity in this fake fantasy game.
Yeah, some people get a little too carried away.
Listen, man, I'm just saying, I hate seeing those human-looking blue-haired people. I'm so racist to those blue-haired people. I can't help it. Let's see. We got a couple left. We've got Suma says, do you think first-person grid-based dungeon crawlers like SMT could ever make a comeback? And do you think Atlus might do Megami Tensei dungeon RPGs again in the future like it?
Make a comeback? I think there could be an audience for stuff like that, but it is just more of a niche audience in today's standards. People like to see their characters, I guess, especially in RPGs. So, have
you tried any of the first-person Atlus games?
I'm trying to think.
So there's original Soul Hackers, any of the like Persona Q games, Strange Journey, P1.
No, I haven't played any of those, so no.
If you ever see a meme of someone running into a school door over and over, that's probably Persona 1.
Yeah.
Because that's like the go-to meme. Everyone's like, damn, I love Persona 1's original gameplay, and it's just someone slamming into a door in first person for an hour. I think I think there's an audience for it still, but I think these would have to be the kind of games that are like either remasters or way smaller side projects. Because like for the same things that you mentioned of like, I think we're like Atlus especially is made such a name for style and everything that they do that like if they went back to like a first person only battle system, people would be like, oh, this is like I like seeing my all out attacks. I like seeing
Mm-hmm.
like the character models. Like did you ever play Persona Q?
No.
So did you ever play any of the Etrian Odyssey games?
No.
So the Etrian Odyssey games are very similar of that like first person dungeon crawling, but one of the mechanics I thought was really really cool about how they still made it feel like a Persona game even through a first person perspective. And one of the reasons it was so smart they made those games in first person outside the fact that that's what they're known for is the party in those games are huge because you can be any mixture of it was 5 character parties and it was anyone from Persona 3, 4 and 5.
Oh
So it'd be
yeah.
like, oh yeah,
Wow.
those would be like a nightmare to try and design all of those in every
Mm-hmm.
battle. But what they would do is you could always see your character doing moves kind of coming in from the side. So
Mm.
it would be like you'd be kind of like almost like when you would throw a Pokemon attack out, like you would see the animation and then they'd come back to you.
I see. Okay.
And then for like finals and limit breaks, they would do like full 3D sequences and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
like that was kind of like a good one with it. But yeah, I think generally nowadays, like I don't think you could even Atlas at their best. I think if you made a like Persona 6 in first person would just never happen. Like they would just be like
Yeah.
people would feel way too alienated.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we just got one last question. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything else. So this one's from Luis Perez, who says, "Do you feel with recent years that Sega Sammy are only letting Atlus make games like SMT and Persona, but Metaphor is their way of proving that they can still have a successful new IP? P.S. I would love for them to make a new Etrian Odyssey game if they ever choose to take a break from the current formula."
Hmm. It's hard to say. Sega definitely likes to do a lot of the same franchise. I mean, look at Yakuza and pumping those things out. But yeah, I'm like, Persona's not going anywhere. They'll never let that go anywhere. It's too popular. But I think so, them saying like, hey, this is a kind of our opportunity to try something different. Like, of course, there's Persona DNA in Metaphor. It's clearly there, but it's different enough, I guess. But I don't think it's maybe not necessarily them letting them do it, but it's just them themselves wanting to do something different because they've been doing Persona games for so long. So I think it was exciting for the team to do it. That's more what I think it was, them wanting to do something different.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the fact that if it was just Metaphor as the only new IP we've seen, I would probably feel a little more pessimistic about the whole thing. Because obviously, yeah, it's like after making something like Persona 5, you have the most big dick energy possible that it's like, yeah, they could come out and say that they want to make uh like anything, like it would be new IP or some crazy sequel or whatever, and they'd have carte blanche just because it's like, hey, yeah, like we have other teams, we've got other things we can focus on. You can do whatever you want. Ironically, I think an interesting comparison to the whole Studio Zero thing, and I mean no disrespect to like Ken Levine, but I think it's a very similar to comparison from when Ken downsized his team from BioShock Infinite to Judas, whereas they both were in development for a really long time, lots of pre-building, lots of pre-planning before ever really showing anything off, and wanting to scale down the team, even though like eventually they do like scale back up as they get more in there. I think the kind of reason I'd look towards Studio Zero as a more successful example is you can still look at both of those games and you'll be like, oh, this is still from the guy from BioShock, or this is still from the team who did Persona 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were able to keep that vision and everything they wanted without people kind of losing their jobs. Whereas like the one thing that always rubbed me the wrong way about what happened after BioShock Infinite was like, if they wanted to make a smaller team and do something else, that's great. I just always hated that everyone else lost their jobs and had to go do something else. Like they couldn't have just had, okay, we're gonna have a Rational still be a thing, And then Ken Levine's team is going to make something smaller over the next 8 or so years, and then all of them kind of like had to go find new work on their own. Whereas no one who stayed on Persona 5 to Persona 5 Royal, none of them like had to go to the new team or had to like lose their job with that. So that was kind of like that comparison of like, I think there's a way of doing it and having that freedom that's not just kind of worrying only about the creative heads involved.
Yeah.
With that, though, I mean, Atlus is still... They've taken chances. They're not always great, but I mean, the fact that we live in a world where they made Soul Hackers 2, it didn't work out very well for them in the long run, but I would have never thought that they would bring that back. And then even something crazy, like, I still think about how much I love Tokyo Mirage Sessions, and I'm like, that's such a... Like, that game shouldn't exist. Like, that's such a fever dream of a game that, like... And I joke about this, but like, man, especially with how Nintendo has been so weird recently with like, man, you just never know what Nintendo's going to announce. Like, there was a time that I would have said there is no way in hell we will ever get Tokyo Mirage Sessions anything. And then when I said that, they put it on Switch. And now we're like a couple years away from it. And I'm like, I'm not going to lie. If they made another game on the next Switch with that team, there would be like 7 of us excited for it, but I'd be here for it. I'm like, this is the same people who made Emio. Like, they made the Famicom Detective Trilogy, like, 30 years after the fact.
Yeah.
So, it's a never say never thing. I think, honestly, if I had to compare both companies, I would say Atlus probably has more creative freedom than Sega. Sega feels a lot more dire. Sega is like, every time they try anything new that's not Sonic or Yakuza, it blows up in their face. Like, Brad, do you even remember Sakura Wars Remake?
No,
not
I
even
never
a remake.
played it.
Sorry, the reboot.
No, I remember it coming out, but I didn't play it.
Yeah, like that came out a month after Persona 5 Royal. Like nobody cared about that game. No one was paying attention. And it's like they've done a bunch of other little things, but whether it be like smaller budget games, like I shouldn't say none of their other ones. Like they've had some interesting ones with it. Like the fact that Sega in the West actually published that Demon Slayer game and not Bandai Namco, I was very surprised about. I was like, oh, that's actually really smart. Like, most people disregard that game, but like, Demon Slayer is so big that like, that's kind of like Dragon Ball. Even the worst Dragon Ball game, you're still going to make your money back.
Yeah. So,
it
was surprising.
They make some interesting moves, but I think like as an Atlus fan first and foremost with it, I'm honestly more of like a, hey man, I'd like the Yakuza team to have more fun. Like, I want more Lost Judgments before another Yakuza.
Yeah. I want them to take a break for a little bit.
Yeah. Can we go back to can we just like give them like...
Give me one game in 2 years or something. For God's sakes.
I don't know. I would say like we could have a Studio Zero team, but like I'm at least glad once... Oh, damn, I'm forgetting his name, but the series director... The guy who definitely dresses like he's in the Mafia.
Right, yeah.
Like, when he left for NetEase, I was like, dang, that kind of sucks, because I really wanted, like, them to make a split-off team. And I'm like, I'm at least glad the base games have, like, kept a pretty good, like, consistency and quality. But, like, I feel like their focus has just been on get a game out every year. Every year. And versus be like, hey, man... most Yakuza fans probably haven't played all Yakuza games. Like, we could probably we could do with a catch-up year. Could we have a year? Just one year.
Please. Let me catch up.
Like, could you imagine, like, after Pirate Yakuza, they come out and they say, guys, we are proud to announce that there will be no Yakuza game for the next 16 months.
I would be stoked. So thank God.
Like, oh, thank God, we can catch up. Yeah, like, honestly, God. I would probably buy it. I would buy Pirate Yakuza just to thank them for that. I'd be like, oh, thank God. Oh, all right. Well, much like the Yakuza developers, we have been at this for quite a while. So, Brad, I'm going to wrap up and finally free you. So, apologies for stealing you for 2 hours.
Oh, it's all good. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great having you on. Where can people find you when you're not streaming and podcasting yourself?
You could find me on Twitter or X or whatever at Bradley Ellis 87. If you want to find me on there, that's where I'm at.
Now, if we ever get really adventurous and want to find you on YouTube, is your YouTube channel at least like sort of easy to find?
I don't have one quite yet. In the future, if I do, whenever I do make it, it'll be easy.
Okay. Also, I mean, hey, you stream a lot, man. Like, you stream a ton.
Yeah, I try to stream like 3 times a week at least. I try to. But yeah, you can find me there. I'm just Bradley at twitch.tv/Bradley Ellis.
Okay, awesome. And I will have all the links for the shows, Twitter, and all that in the show notes. Everyone can find you nice and easy.
Cool.
But that was the show. Everybody, thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week. Hopefully not $300 more poor. Hopefully I can resist the Kickstarter temptations until then. But before then, I did just want to give big thanks and shout out to everybody listening, as well as all the Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/SMTN. Reminder, if you enjoy helping me not afford Kickstarters, you can support the show directly at the $1 and up and $5 tier. All the $5 tier people get a shout out at the end of the show because you are also awesome executive producers. So thank you to John Massey, Crazy Sloth, Michael Wilson, Budweiser Tall Cans, Carlos Hernandez, Cross Renren, Winnie, Jagingus, Goro Cero, Solaire, Stephen Yip, Patrick Dessart. Thank you all so much. Brad, thank you for being such a great sport and coming on here. And I can't believe I at least want to say a fourth of this episode was our pre-intro rambling talk. At least a fourth of this show.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me take you off the rails so much tonight.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you again for listening, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.